Hello, fabulous friends, fans, and superstars. Welcome to Synchronicity Web TV. I am your host, Nadiya Shah, and this is your moment of synchronicity. I'm so excited to celebrate with you today one of our great living legends in astrology, the one and only Richard Tarnas. I know that Richard Tarnas's work has meant a lot to a lot of us out there. I know for me, one of his books, Cosmos and Psyche, was when my respect for his work really took root. And now it is such a thrill to announce that Richard Tarnas is coming to Synchronicity University as part of the September 2023 speaker series, where for a very limited time, you can choose your tuition rate as low as just $5 a class. Really, you are not going to be able to hear Richard Tarnas speak or present a talk for this low a rate. And of course, you'll see how much he's worth it and so much more. Richard, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Nadiya. Good to see you again.
Yes, the last time I interviewed you, it was 2012, and we were at the UAC 2012 conference in New Orleans. At the time, very few people knew me. As I was walking around the conference, I did so with an anonymity that, you know, I can't walk around astrology conferences with today because now my work has managed to reach a lot of people within astrology. But I remember at the time, I was able to interview you, and I remember you telling me that I was good, I was a good interviewer, and that I should keep going. And I'll tell you, like, the years after that, there were moments when I really needed to remember that encouragement, and I will always be grateful for you for that.
I'm glad you have that positive memory. I remember it being a cheerful and constructive interview, and I'm glad that the effect of our conversation endured in this positive way for you. That's great.
Thank you. And of course, what we spoke about as well, because I remember we got very philosophical around matters of astrology. And for everybody out there, I'll be sure to link that interview below. And so, Richard, let's pick up where we left off. Now, here we are speaking 13 years later. Where are you? Go ahead.
I think it would be 11 years later, actually, right? 2012 to 2023.
2012 to 2023. You're right. My math. Okay. You are the Harvard educated professor here, obviously.
Not at all. Anyway, I was just thinking, yeah, it's been 11 years, which is a long time. And then it gets to be a shorter and shorter time as you get older.
Yes. I mean, you blink and 11 years have passed. It can really feel that way. Just showing up for your life. It's amazing how much a person gets done just doing that. And since we last spoke, where are you in terms of, like, I remember, like I said, we got philosophical. Where are you today in terms of your understanding as an astrologer, your relationship to astrology itself?
Well, I think in many ways, what I wrote in Cosmos and Psyche and discussed in our conversation years ago is still very much alive and present for me today. But it's naturally it evolves, and I think I've got a somewhat more I see the astrological universe that opens itself up to those of us who have been initiated into astrology. I see it as a kind of gift to us that allows for a direct communication between our minds and souls and the mind and soul of the cosmos. And that's a big thing. Most societies, most cultures in human history have had not only an intimate relationship with the surrounding natural world and the universe and the heavens, but they've also had a sense of being able to understand its language. And astrology is a continuing tradition that, in a sense, provides us with a language that permits us to understand the symbolic nature of like the movements of the planets and their relationships are intelligible in terms of our understanding of what they are symbolically representing, in the same way that you and I are speaking with words now, and these are symbolic of realities that people can resonate with. Well, it's quite something when the universe itself provides that kind of language that permits us to get a sense for who are we and what is this moment pregnant with, and how can we understand the unfolding of history and of our own personal biographies and so forth. To get that kind of illumination as a result of understanding this language from the universe is a tremendous gift. So I suppose, in other words, it's a gift from the universe to each one of us. Each of us has a birth chart that's unique to us. Each of us has transits that are moment to moment unfolding, and we all participate in world transits that are unfolding moment to moment. And by having a, it's as my colleague, friend, and teacher Stanislav Grof said, astrology is basically a Rosetta Stone that allows us this kind of understanding of the cosmic language. And what we have to remember is that we're coming out of the mainstream modern worldview that looked at the cosmos as disenchanted, as being utterly incapable of intrinsic meanings or purposes. So from that point of view, any meanings and purposes that astrologers were seeing in the movements of the planets, sun and moon, so forth, were just projections of our own needs, our own wishes, our own subjectivity. And what a deep initiation into astrology permits us is a sense of breaking out of that box, breaking out of that prison, really, of feeling that there's no echo to our soul out in the larger cosmos. And now we have that that sense of being in a larger cosmic matrix that is in some sense bathing us with meaning and purpose all the time. Our moving earth, our individual lives, our own our each moment, etc. All these are being, we are a moving center of cosmic meaning, of it's attending to us. We're not just a random speck of meaningless dust in a meaningless universe. That's a huge paradigm shift, and it's also a very healing one for those who have the privilege of having this opened up to them. And so that's, I suppose, I've got maybe a little more vivid and articulate sense of that embeddedness in a universe that in some sense is expressing a care for us individually and as an earth community.
You used the word initiated a couple of times there. What does that consist of? How do you understand that?
Well, I'm using that word because it has deep resonance with initiation rites of passage that and rituals that go back to the beginning of human history. And every major religion, as well as of course the great shamanic traditions and indigenous wisdom traditions, all have had initiatory rituals that are essential to being a human. We moderns generally have not had that level, that depth of initiation that allows us into a deeper relationship with the universe. Most of our modern initiatory rituals are, they can be quite meaningful, but they don't have that cosmic depth. They don't also typically have such powerful transformational influence on the soul. So you get a degree in an academic program, and that's an initiation into a community of scholars that you didn't belong to before. That's important. And you've gone through a transformation in order to get there. At the same time, though, it's not quite the same kind of transformation that is demanded by the great rites of passage that have been part of our human history, where there's a kind of dying to an old identity or an old way of looking at things, an old way of looking at the universe, and an opening up to a deeper one. And astrology, I agree with Liz Green that astrology is something that kind of chooses you rather than you choosing it. I mean, it comes into your life, I think, as a blessing, as an act of grace by the ensouled universe. And we don't always accept that. We may be given hints, we may be given an invitation, and we might just say, that is just such superstitious nonsense. I'm not even going to go there. I'm not even going to look into it. And so I'm using that word initiation both in the sense that, one, it is just you have, or we have learned a language that allows us into a new mode of being than we had before. So it gives us a new beginning, an initiation in that sense, of a different worldview, a different way of new approaches to understanding our lives and the universe. But I also have in the back of my mind also this deeper resonance with the great death rebirth initiatory rituals that I think more and more of us are being pulled towards, whether it's in wilderness vision quests or psychedelic therapy or participating in indigenous rituals and so forth. And this deeper resonance I have in mind in terms of astrology is that we kind of you have to, in a sense, let go of or die to an old paradigm that looked upon astrology as being just a superstitious nonsense, and instead we have a strong psychological identification with whatever worldview we're holding. So if you're shifting out of that skeptical, disenchanted perspective on the nature of the universe and on the nature of esoteric traditions like astrology, or even on the nature of religious experience or mystical experience, and you think it's all just subjective poppycock that somebody's feels the need to or the misfortune of experiencing. If you think that, and then you have an opening to the kind of worldview that I think a profound astrological perspective gives you, you kind of have to go through a letting go of an old identity, a whole way of defining who I am in this universe where I'm making my way without any I mean, in a way, there is a kind of sense of autonomy or freedom that comes from thinking that there's no higher meaning than what we human beings come up with, and we can orient our lives according to what we think is best. Well, this astrological perspective says it's a little more complicated than that. And part of our freedom comes in finding out who we are more deeply and becoming more conscious of what had been unconscious, so that we're not puppets of unconscious forces that are working in us. So in that respect, it's a kind of, yeah, it's a paradigm shift, but it's also an identity shift that is required of us. So that's an elaborate answer to your question. I guess you've asked me two questions, and both were kind of elaborate answers. One about initiation, and one about my the evolution of my understanding of astrology. But hopefully, our listeners will find something valuable in that.
You mentioned the worldview, going from a disenchanted worldview to an enchanted worldview, and how that can be being initiated into this whole new paradigm. And I was thinking about how you never know what that's actually going to look like, right? But it does look like more and more people are actively chasing or hoping to cultivate those moments of initiation that you mentioned. So whether it is through, as you mentioned, vision quests and maybe ayahuasca being a part of that, or whether it's through participating in other programs that help you to cultivate self-knowledge, Jungian therapy, 12-step programs. There's so many different ways and pathways to which people find themselves confronted with that sense of, okay, I've had a certain worldview this long, but this is no longer working for me. And now they start to feel that sense of that enchanted worldview open up. And the enchanted worldview, it sounds like you're saying it's essentially alive. I mean, you described it as healing. Can you talk about that? What do you think is healing about it? I have my theories around that, but I would love to hear yours.
Sure. Yeah, what I have in mind with that, with the healing, is that we have most of us grew up, unless you happen to be growing up with either in a society that continued to hold an enchanted worldview, or you were one of the relatively rare children growing up in a family of astrologers, let's say, which obviously there's getting to be more and more families like that, including my own. But for most of us, we were educated. If you received a good 20th or early 21st century education, you were taught the universe was basically a material and mechanistic evolutionary process that had accidentally or through random mutations and natural selection had eventually brought forth the complexity of mammalian and primate animals that and their brains that eventually brought about human consciousness and our sense of being aware and having a sense of purpose and seeking meaning, but that we live in a universe that is lacking in intrinsic purpose and meaning, that is unconscious. And so that can eventually become the source of a sense of kind of cosmic loneliness and isolation, and especially when life circumstances or historical circumstances become very, very problematic or critical or dicey, dark, crushing. One doesn't have a deeper foundation to deal with that because one is in this alienated, isolated bubble in which there isn't anything larger that's holding my life in a meaningful way. And so I can't, I've given thousands of readings in my life in my earlier decades, and I can't tell you that, and I'm sure a lot of other astrological counselors would say the same thing. I can't tell you the number of people who, having received a an overview, an analysis of their birth chart, of their personal transits, etc., I can't tell you the number of people who say at a certain moment, "Oh my God, it's so good to know it's not just me, that I am what's going on for me and is going on in my life and in my psyche is in some sense in harmony with, or is made meaningful through this larger cosmic perspective." It's liberating to find out that you're not a soul in a soulless universe. You can only have so much therapeutic healing if your entire therapeutic context is one that is teaching you that you're looking for wholeness, you're looking to have a deep soul sense of integrity in your life. But by the way, you do live in a universe that is soulless, and that is your origin. That's a little problematic, and we all carry that contradiction in us until we have some initiatory experience, some grace that comes in, and it can come from another person who opens it up. It can come from reading a book. It can come from a revelatory experience in an ayahuasca ceremony, or it could take Jungian therapy, as you mentioned, meditation. All these can be potential sources of a breaking out of that bubble. And the beauty of astrology is that if you start exploring it and integrating it and becoming conversant with that language, and adopt it as a kind of continuing practice in one's life, every single time you're looking at your birth chart or somebody else's, and that you're looking at your transits or progressions, or someone else's, or looking at the world transit, every time you do that, it's a kind of revolutionary act in terms of the larger paradigm, because it shouldn't be happening unless in other words, the meaning shouldn't be there. You shouldn't be able to be delighted. By the way, I think a lot of the attraction of astrology is the delight it gives, the sense, its beauty. It just opens up a sense of unbelievable beauty that is carried in the universe through this kind of harmony of the spheres, this kind of music of the planetary movements. There's a kind of aesthetic delight, in addition to all the other things, the healing, the practical insight it gives you, the psychological self-awareness that it can increase. All those are huge. But so also is the sense of seeing the beauty of the universe. And remember that the word cosmos has beauty built right into it. The Greek word cosmos was a peculiarly Greek combination of order, pattern, and beauty. Like our word cosmetic comes from the same source as cosmos. And the Greeks had that sense of the beauty, kind of spiritual, transcendent beauty of the universe, and they named it cosmos, a term that seems to have originated within the Pythagorean tradition. And so I want to emphasize that that's an additional gift that astrology gives us, is that quality of aesthetic delight, and seeing. It's kind of like listening to a great, the violin concerto by Beethoven or something like that. The way, or Bach, where you get a glimpse of how these complex movements of the planets and their cycles and these kind of archetypal comings and goings and interactions and mergings and flowerings and so forth. What you just get a sense, it's very much like the complexity of beautiful music. So anyway, so that's partly what I have in mind when I say it's healing. You just, it's like coming home in a certain way after being a stranger in a strange land.
You are not a soul in a soulless universe. That is very powerful to consider. I know we don't have a whole lot of time left. One question is popping up for me. I just want to ask, do you think planets have souls? Do you think it operates under a larger soul? Maybe that's a big question, but how would you, or what is your personal connection, understanding around that?
So I think the universe as a whole is ensouled, and therefore every being in it is ensouled by definition. Human beings are ensouled in particular ways that are quite individuated from person to person, but so also is the redwood tree in my backyard, or the ducklings that are swimming in the pond outside, and so also is the earth itself. I mean, we refer, of course, there's the Gaia theory that emerged in the 1960s with James Lovelock, very helpful scientific breakthrough there, but it was named Gaia at the suggestion, by the way, of William Golding, who wrote Lord of the Flies and The Inheritors, and the novelist who was a friend of the scientist James Lovelock, who came up with the theory of Gaia to explain the seeming self-regulating integrity of the Earth as a planet. But now the question there then, as you bring it up is, well, what about Venus and Mars and Jupiter, Neptune? Are they themselves ensouled as planets? These are the planets are, on the one hand, physical objects made of ice or gas or rocky substances and so forth. But I like Rudolf Steiner's formulation where he says everything material in the universe is the physical expression of a spiritual reality. Everything. That makes complete sense to me. You and I we're seeing our faces here, our bodies, but those are physical. That's what's apparent to our five senses, as William Blake, the poet, put it, in this age. But it's the part of the soul that is immediately visible to our five senses. Now, I think that's true all the way down in everything in the universe, that everything is an expression of a spiritual dimension of being, a spiritual reality, sometimes spiritual beings. Now the planets, and actually we're going to get into this, or I'm going to get into this when I have my lecture next month in September with your synchronicity community. I will be addressing something of what I am about to say right now, which is that the planets appear to be deeply, deeply associated with, and perhaps identified with in some essential way, with these extremely powerful cosmic archetypal principles that also can be directly experienced as gods and goddesses. and people have those experiences. I've had them in extraordinary states of consciousness where one's not just looking at a Saturn Venus conjunction, or looking at Mars and whatever planet one's looking at as something. You're not just seeing it as like, okay, what are the key words I learned in my astrological textbook that I can apply to where this planet is right now in my chart or in a progression, etc. It's much more than a keyword correlation with that physical planet. There seems to be behind those keywords, behind those descriptions that astrologers are always refining and offering to better articulate what the meanings are of these great cosmic principles. Behind that is seems to be something profoundly transcendent. Number one, in the sense of the way Plato described the cosmic or archetypal principle of he called them the ideas with a capital I. They're the cosmic idea, not just a human idea. Or he also called them the forms. This is in Greek. It was eidos and ideia. But he was getting at the idea that everything that we see, every person that we see, every experience that we have that is in some way beautiful is beautiful to the exact extent that it is participating in the very archetypal cosmic principle of the beautiful, as capital B, that informs all beautiful, small b, beautiful things and babies and flowers and sunsets. They all are beautiful because this kind of timeless, eternal form or principle of the beautiful, capital B, is present in that sunset or in that flower. And then not only is it a Platonic archetypal principle, which is a kind of philosophical or metaphysical way of approaching it, they're also personified gods and goddesses that didn't just get kind of fabricated by the ancient mythic fantasy. They were experienced in a very direct way by the ancients. What I'm suggesting on the basis of when you read Homer or you talk to someone who is still living in a society that is still carrying long time, like indigenous traditions, like Native American or Aboriginal in Australia and so forth. These are not just philosophical principles. They can be experienced directly as gods and goddesses, so that the Platonic principle of the beautiful, beauty that is transcendent, eternal, beyond time and space, etc., but is manifest in all the temporal and spatial concrete forms of beauty in our lives. They also express themselves as gods and goddesses or spirits of a very powerful nature. And so in that sense, every planet, I think what the Mesopotamians and Egyptians, they sometimes, and the ancient Greeks, they sometimes would kind of have the image of the planets as being the god or goddess herself or himself, or they sometimes would have it as it's the domicile of that god or goddess. It's the home. It's or then as you get a little bit later in the tradition, then these are gods and goddesses that are that a particular planet is sacred to, like the Platonic dialogue that talks about, it's called the epinomis or epinomis, Epinomis. It's usually carried in most Platonic, in most anthologies of Plato's dialogues. It may have been written by one of Plato's students, might have been written by Plato. There's scholarly uncertainty there, but they're clearly working in a very Platonic mode. And he uses the phrase, by the way, it's in that work that's the first time that the Greeks, or that's the first time that the Greek planets, because then it was Zeus and Hermes and Aphrodite, not Mercury and Jupiter and Venus, which are the Roman equivalents. Well, they were naming, as this dialogue of Plato's or the Platonic tradition states, the Greeks named the planets according to the gods and goddesses that the Babylonians or Chaldeans had identified in their own mythological tradition, and the Greeks recognized the parallels between the different cultural mythologies or mythological figures. So, but the phrase that Plato used in that dialogue, or the Platonist used in that dialogue, was that this planet is sacred to Kronos. That planet is sacred to Zeus, and this planet is sacred to Aphrodite. So what you see there is a kind of evolving understanding of what's the relationship of that visible planet to a soul reality, a spiritual being. And it could be, in some deep sense, the being itself, or it could be sacred to that being, or it could be the domicile of that being. There's a lot of different ways of framing it, and I don't have that kind of clairvoyant insight to be able to say, okay, that's the one that's right. What I am interested in, though, is how these different perspectives have evolved, and yet there is this continuity of, basically, we are living in a meaningful and souled universe that seems to be structured or patterned by archetypal principles and forms, and that they, looming behind or above or through all of these archetypal principles, are actual gods and goddesses who rule whole universes, each one themselves. You walk into the universe of Aphrodite and everything is beautiful, and or love or romance, etc. That's the governing gestalt of that experiential universe. While in Mercury's universe, it's what we're doing right now: communication, thinking, words, the transmitting from one mind to other minds, and so forth. All that's Mercury, and each god and goddess has its own archetypal universe that it oversees, as it were. Okay,
I can feel some Jupiter here too.
Oh, for
definitely,
sure. Yeah.
With how philosophical it is. Yeah.
Yeah, and Neptunian, with the whole spiritual, mystical frame of reference that we're working within. It's Uranian in its paradigm shifting way. Yeah, all the planets are present every moment.
That is so beautifully put. Richard Tarnas, once again, is coming to Synchronicity University as part of the September 2023 speaker series. For a limited time, you can choose your tuition rate. This is one of our living legends. This is a talk not to miss. Richard, thank you. Thank you for your trust, for your brilliance, for your sharing. I'm so looking forward to your talk, and what a privilege it is to talk to you again. Even though it's been a few years, your wisdom, I felt, has stayed, especially came forward when I needed it. And here you are again, further evolving that wisdom in your own way. You are more mystical now. You are more academic, and I'm sure you still are academic, but in our conversation today, it seems like the more mystical side is part of your evolution in your understanding of your role as astrologer. Is that fair?
I probably was, you know, when you're in the middle of your career as a professor or scholar, et cetera, when probably is more cautious about letting out the full expanse of one's vision, because you're always kind of on a tightrope. You're kind of you're trying to balance multiple demands and perspectives, and there's the academic world, there's the esoteric astrological world, etc. And yeah, I think probably you're right that as I've gotten older now, there's a kind of greater liberation to just say it out front. And so that's what we did today.
An unabashedness with owning the more mystical side of who you are and how you understand the cosmos. It is a wonderful evolution to see, and I look forward to seeing the next decade plus of your evolution as well.
Well, thank you very much, Nadiya. I appreciate your good spirit and good heart, and thanks for the invitation and for being such a good interviewer.
Thank you. I will hold that for the next 11 years, I tell you. I will hold that as well. Thank you again, Richard. And thank you, everybody out there, for watching. Until we connect again, take care. Bye.